how do I pray without ceasing? So you've got this verse in the New Testament, here, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, top of the screen there says, pray without ceasing.
All right, just a quick update. As expected, Dr. Abel Damina has finally responded to Apostle Arome. You know, recently Apostle Arome talked about what he said concerning pornography, when he said, if you are caught up with the addiction of pornography, you should just keep on. Don't try to stop watching pornography, right? But while you are watching it, you should also spend more time in the scripture or listening to his message. So, as expected, Abel Damina has responded, but in his response, he had to bring up about two things that has got to trend about Apostle Arome and kind of use it to criticize him. But I want us to listen carefully, okay? Because even in his attempt to criticize him, he had to misquote what Apostle said and also insinuated what Apostle Arome never said. But before I get into that, I want us to listen to what Dr. Abel Damina has to say.
Here, one man of God who is always saying that he knows he has not slept with another woman since he married his wife, so that is why he's a righteous man.
Now, did Apostle say he has never slept with a woman? Yes, of course. Is it wrong? No, of course. But did he say that is what makes him a righteous person? Definitely no. So I want us to listen again to the recent video when Apostle had to say that, and maybe you can now see if he actually said that was what makes him righteous. You judge by yourself.
Because you need to know the reason for which Jesus came. Have you read the scripture that says, for this purpose the Son of Man was made manifest? Why? That he might do what? Even though works is in plural, if you read that scripture in context, what he calls the works of the devil is sin. So it means sin should reign as long as Jesus has not come. The evidence that Jesus has come to your life, has come to my life, is that sin cannot reign. That's the proof that the Son of Man was made manifest. That's the proof that he was made manifest. When I'm 89, 90, I will raise my right hand and say if there's any woman I touched in my pilgrimage, because I know how long I will live. The woman should disgrace me. The proof that I did not touch any woman. What that is saying is that Jesus came to me. The Son of Man was manifested to me. And the proof is that I lived above sin.
Let me play that again.
The Son of Man was manifested to me. And the proof is that I lived above sin.
Now, if you paid careful attention, you will discover, obviously, what Damina said is actually half-truth. And as a matter of fact, we can say he lied against Apostle Arome. Now, I understand the need for him to give a quick rebuttal, but it's also important, in most cases, listening to people, what they say.
You have not slept with another woman, but you're full of pride, cockiness, and all kinds of stuff. Is that your yardstick for righteousness? Except your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees, which is not possible, you shall in no likewise have a part in the kingdom. How are you different from the rich young ruler? Not by works of righteousness. When did lack of fornication become a standard for righteousness? When he keeps bragging. What's that? What's that? What's that? You are bragging. You even have wife. What about eunuchs that have never slept with a woman?
Well, Dr. Damina is not the first person that had issue with this. And of course, when this matter trended, obviously, Apostle Arome gave a response to Pastor John Osayi. I'm going to leave the link to the video to his response, why he had to make that statement, because he brought biblical defense to why he made that statement. Now, I'm going to leave a link to the video, which I did. You can check it out. I want us to consider this scripture of what Apostle Paul said, and maybe you tell me if you can also consider this a boast. Acts 20:33-34. I have coveted no man's silver or gold or apparel. Yea, Ye yourself know that these hands have ministered unto my necessity, and to them that were with me. Or will you also consider when he said this? I thank my God, I speak with tongues more than you all. Now, when you hear Paul say this, will you say Paul is boasting, or will you try to understand why would Paul make this statement? And just like Apostle Osayi, we also saw the reason why he had to make that statement. And of course, he attributed whatsoever you people consider boast, or whatever boast he's making, as to a proof that Jesus manifested himself to him. I think if any man should boast, he should boast in the fact that by the grace of God, he is able to live above that kind of sin, considering the fact that when he initially made this statement, it was a time when there were rampant stories of ministers having strange affairs with women. Let's continue with what Damina had to say in the other aspect of his rebuke.
Every time you brag by your own moral standard, you will always lack one thing.
Again, but of course, we have seen from what Apostle said, he wasn't bragging by his own moral standard, but he was bragging as a proof that Christ was made manifest to him. So I want to ask, is it wrong to actually say the proof, one of the proof that Christ is made manifest to me is that I cannot live above sin?
And I hear he's going around telling people, if you don't pray for 10 hours, you are still joking in your Christianity. 10 hours? That's a wicked tax master.
Now, we need to establish this. Is there anywhere in the scripture that specifically said you should pray for 10 hours? Of course, no. But is Apostle Osayi going about saying this to make it as an established doctrine? Of course, no. Now, what does the Bible talk about praying? Because he just called him a wicked tax master. I think it would be better if we understand why people make this statement, in as much as we have to agree that this template Apostle gave of 10 hours is just something he has been able to craft out by the reason of his work with God. But what exactly did the Bible talk about? Of course, if you have read the scripture, Paul advised and he said that we should pray without ceasing. What does it mean to pray without ceasing? What does it exactly? What is your understanding about praying without ceasing? Can you compare praying without ceasing? If you are to pray without ceasing and somebody coming to tell you that you should pray for 10 hours. Now, clearly in the scripture never mentioned that you should pray for 10 hours. Bible prescription is that you should pray without ceasing. And if you are to mention what is without ceasing, then anybody coming to tell you 10 hours is actually under exaggerating what the Bible said, because the Bible said you should pray without ceasing. And come to think of it, the question we should ask ourselves is this: is there anywhere in the New Testament where people have prayed long? Numerous scripture, numerous places. I mean, one notable one is when Peter was locked up. The Bible recorded that the church went into prayer and they prayed long. The question is this: why would they have to pray that long in order for God to come and intervene and release Peter from the prison? I need you to ask this question. In as much as we can actually agree, nowhere in the scripture that it was recorded you must pray 10 hours. However, scriptural standard is that we should pray without ceasing. And I found a short clip from Mike Winger of what it means to pray without ceasing. Let's listen to him.
How do I pray without ceasing? So you've got this verse in the New Testament here, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, top of the screen there says, pray without ceasing. This can be quite a challenge for people when they think about it. How do I pray without ceasing? And I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and I want to break it down. I'll use biblical examples that talk about prayer. I will also talk about the value of prayer itself and then how to apply it. Now, let me just say first off, when I'm analyzing a verse, when you're analyzing a verse of scripture and you don't know what it means right away, like you read it and you go, it's not immediately obvious what that means to me, it's good to think about your, what I call options. Now, it's not that all these are valid interpretations, but you sort of say, well, what could it mean? It could mean this, it could mean that. So it's a good process to go through with any verse of scripture where you're trying to understand what it means. So one option would be that pray without ceasing means that you're actually in a continual state of prayer. You're literally praying at all times. So right now, while I'm talking to you, that I'm actually praying at the same time. That would be challenging. You'd have to be praying while you're sleeping, praying while preaching, praying while you're running a marathon, praying while you're doing all sorts of other things that where, yeah, you wouldn't normally think about prayer at those moments. I think that that's probably too wooden, right? And there are examples in scripture that weigh in on this immediately. That option of, does it mean I literally pray at every moment of every day? And some of you are thinking, but I do, Mike. I'm in this sort of communal relationship with God where I'm praying at all times. That is it's not that that's not a valuable thing, but that seems to not be what the Bible means when it says prayer, right? Like you're sort of walking in the Spirit. That's a different thing, but it's not what the Bible means when it says prayer. So the Bible will actually have people praying and then they stop, they're done praying. Well, Jesus then went off and prayed. But if Jesus was praying at all times, the Gospels couldn't say he then went and prayed. Or when the disciples, he says, couldn't you just pray with me for an hour? They weren't praying while they were sleeping. They weren't praying at other times than they were when Jesus asked them to in the Garden of Gethsemane. Those examples of people not praying in Scripture, even ideals like Jesus, there's moments where he was not praying. It seems, a normal reading of the text would seem to say, like, yeah, that's too strict of a thing. To say that pray without ceasing means Christians have to, like, be in literally every second of every day, be in an active moment of prayer. I don't think that's quite right. There is, however, you could say prayer, maybe as a lower it down a notch on how wooden we are, prayer is a general attitude of continual awareness and concern for God, wherein, like whatever happens in your daily life, you have this gut reaction to pray. You know, you're driving and you have a spare moment of your time and you just start praying. You hear something from a friend that's going on and you just immediately think to pray. That prayer is this sort of constant reaction to the things that are going on in your life. That actually seems more doable, seems more following examples we see in Scripture. We see things like Paul the Apostle praying. He prays a lot, this guy, and he's constantly praying for the people. I pray for you continually. He doesn't mean every second of every day, but he does pray for them a lot. Okay, so another option would be